Hey everyone, welcome to another Serie A fantasy video. And in this video, we are going to be talking about what information we can gather from the Coppa Italia round of 64 that just occurred over the past weekend. For those of you that don't know, Coppa Italia is the domestic cup for the Italian league, and this goes generally as far down to Serie C. Four teams from there and a bunch of teams from Serie B, and all of the Serie A teams take part in various rounds. Some teams have already been placed further down the line. And so this is just going to be covering each team that took part, but most of them are your weaker teams. And we're trying to see, are there some players that might be worth getting from some of these teams? Maybe even not right from the start, but players that we could look at in the future. Before we start, the community's been great. I've actually been talking to a couple people, whether that be in the comments, direct Twitter messages and stuff like that. And I've actually seen some different accounts that have been kind of opening up, talking about Serie A and Serie A fantasy in general. So that's been really cool to see. Let's keep that trend going and grow the community to make this game even bigger. So without further ado, please like and subscribe, and then we can get going. All right, so the first team we're looking at is Udinese. I'm not really sure how much we can take from this. They won 2-1, so a very small margin of victory against a team from Serie C called Feral Pilaso. Maybe I'm pronounced that wrong. I don't know. But definitely an established Serie A side should be beating this team. They did score one of their goals on a penalty. Deulofeu took it. So if you're an owner of Deulofeu, that could be good knowing that he's on penalty kicks. And Success, who is a player, not just the word success, was playing alongside him at a price of 5.5 million. So if you're looking for a cheap striker just to fill in that place, you don't want to have to play them all the time. He could be a good option playing alongside Deulofeu. He did score a goal. Second team we're looking at today is Lecce. They lost to Serie B side Cittadella. That is a team that has been challenging for a spot in Serie A the last couple of years. There does seem to be some potential in the Lecce attack. A player that I've actually seen a decent amount of people have called named Strefezza. He seems to be a popular midfield choice option. He seemed to be playing in a high winger role, so kind of in between the midfield and attack. And he's a 5.5 million option, so he could be a good option going down the line, if not starting with him to fill in that midfield. Another big thing was Falcone, I believe coming from Sampdoria. He's another $4.0 million keeper. I did tweet about one already, which we will get to again. But as a backup keeper, I like to spend as little as possible so on my keepers. So I am looking at Falcone as a possible option for a keeper for sure. You just do run the risk of them trying to figure out who's the starting keeper at the start, and maybe starts the first one, but then the other keeper starts the other, and then you don't want to be at a point where you don't have any starting keeper at all. So that's the only risk you're running there. But I think I will want at least one $4 million option, and if it's a playing keeper, all the better. The next is Sampdoria, 1-0 win against Regina, who is also a Serie C side. So you'd like to see more than a one-goal win. I know Udinese just got the one-goal win as well, just 2-1 rather than 1-0 nil. But again, not the greatest showing from a very established Serie A side. I'd still say Sampdoria players are to be avoided to start. They do have the tough run of fixtures. So I would just say not too much to gather from this game. They will be moving on in the Coppa Italia, but I'm not really looking at their players as options for me right now. The next is Spezia, and they had a very convincing win over Serie B side Como over the weekend, 5-1. So this kind of makes you think, does this have a better offense than usual? Last year, I very much saw Spezia as more of a defensive team. I basically had the Spezia keeper almost the entire season, starting out with Zoet and moving on to Provedel. Zoet is a 4.0 million keeper again, and he did start this game. So I don't know if he's going to be starting keeper again to start out the season. It was really nice having him in as a $4 million keeper. The only risk that I currently actually do have in my squad, little spoiler alert, I do have the pairing of Zoet and Falcone for only spending 8 million on my keepers right now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to stick with that just because so early last season, Provedel took the starting spot from Zoet, and that could happen again. And then who knows about Falcone, and I don't want to have 8 million on nothing at the same time. Maybe one keeps and one doesn't. So I am very wishy-washy on that decision right now. But right now I do have two 4.0 million keepers in my team. But another thing is after freeing that up and after a couple other transfers that I've made, I do have 1.5 million in the bank right now, which is actually kind of nice. I do probably want to spend that elsewhere, but at least if I keep 0.5, I can make a transfer to a 4.5 million keeper at some point if I really need to. But Spezia do look like they have some options. At least even an attack with 5 goals, they might be more of an attacking team this year. Next is Empoli, and this kind of I feel like I've stirred up a lot of push for Empoli in this preseason with the good run of fixtures they have to start the season. And I was really big on having Vicario in net, and that was almost nailed on until I saw these two $4.0 million keepers to start the season. But they had a loss to Spal yesterday. It was pretty disappointing. And just makes me think if they're letting in 2 against Spal, are they really as defensively sound as I originally thought they were? Another thing is Ismaili, who has been playing with Empoli for a bit. He is a $4.0 million defender that I'm actually now have transferred in instead of De Winter. De Winter did not start in the game. Ismaili might seem like a more of a nailed-on defender for the same price point. So I currently have him in rather than De Winter, who I originally said. But yeah, so that's another transfer that I've currently made in my side. And just to, I'm not adding more money, not taking away more. And at the end of the day, I might not need it at all because it's probably going to be a bench spot. But that is one thing that's in my squad right now. Torino, nice convincing win over Palermo FC over the weekend, 3-0. Just all around good. Don't have the greatest fixtures, don't have the worst to start. I'm probably not looking to bring any in right away. But just some players to look out for that might be good for your budget to keep costs down. Lukic played well. Sanabria played well. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd point that out. Some good options, maybe more in the future if their fixtures pick up rather than right now. Obviously, we know that a player like Singo could be good in the future, but he's 5.0 million this year instead of just 4.5, so a little more expensive. You might want to fit other players in before Singo. Otherwise, be looking at different teams, but they do look like they're in decent form right now to be starting out the season. Hellas Verona looked very weak against Bari, losing 4-1. So that is a big hit to a Serie B team. The only issue is they definitely did not have a full starting 11 in there. They did not start Simeone or Barak, who both were big fantasy assets last year. I believe Simeone might be injured, and Barak just wasn't in the team. But yes, they definitely didn't have their full strength lineup out there. Just a reminder that for some teams, Coppa Italia is an opportunity to see their other players. This is generally for the bigger teams like your Juve, Inter, AC Milan, Roma, where you play your second string keeper, some players that don't see normal time in Serie A. Generally, with the weaker teams, though, this is an opportunity for them to get some other type of silverware and to get their name on the map more. And so they do play their better players. And the reason why I do put merit in these fixtures that happened over the weekend is these teams have, this is like their last matches before Serie A starts. It was still a week before the kickoff of Serie A, so they don't need to necessarily worry about resting players. They have every opportunity to go for it in these games with their first strength lineup. Yes, a little bit of injury risk there, but this is a competitive match. They'd want to be winning these games. So it kind of surprised me that Barak was not chosen for this match. Makes sense if Simeone's injured that he wasn't in. Salernitana, another team that disappointed as far as Serie A sides, lost 2-0 to Parma. This just kind of backs up the suggestion to avoid Salernitana players start out the season, if not throughout the whole season. They have poor fixtures with a poor performance. I mean, Ribery listed as a midfielder, so you're going to be playing higher up. So maybe in the future he's someone that might look at, but older legs, not sure that that's an avenue I'm going to go down ever. I think I had one Salernitana player, Bonazzoli, in my team at one short point last year, and it just was a waste of a transfer, no production, even though the fixtures were good. So I'm just avoiding Salernitana altogether right now. Monza is the next team to look at. Pretty interesting. They had a 3-2 win against recent Serie A side Frosinone, but they're in Serie B right now. They did give reasons for some future considerations. Caprari, who's listed as a midfielder, he is 8.0 million though, so for an 8.0 million to be on a newly promoted side, that makes it hard to pull the trigger on it. But he did play very well for Hellas Verona last year. And he was very high up in the attack for Monza. So there is a lot of risk, but could be a lot of good reward there. Not something that I'm willing to do to start out the season, especially as they have very tough fixtures to start out the season. But I'm not definitely writing off having any Monza players in my team throughout the season this year. And Sassuolo, they, as a very established Serie A side who generally finishes towards mid-table, if I think they've even finished in the Europa positions a couple times, lost 3-2 to Modena, Serie B side. They're looking worse than last year. Some interesting things that we were able to see though, Raspadori did play, so potentially not having any transfer there with Raspadori. We kind of talked about that a bit in one of my last videos in the Q&A. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Berardi took a PK, so I don't think that's too much of a surprise, but Berardi's still on penalties. He just has a very expensive price point for the team that he's on right now. And an interesting one, and another player that I've transferred in, mostly just to sit on my bench. But Sede, he's $4.5 midfielder option. He's an attacking midfielder, and he played in potentially, like I said, a lot of these teams are starting players that will be starting the season. So potentially a player that will be starting, someone that will likely be starting on my bench week after week, because I'm not going to have great trust in him to be scoring a ton of goals, but just an option there. And one thing that I also want to remind is we are now in an era where Serie A, you have 5 substitutes. Generally, in your starting 11, you should have players that are probably going to be seeing time in some way, whether that be starting or coming off the bench because you thought they were starting. And that means that bench options will not be used very much. You should not be seeing even a first bench option really being used that much, but definitely not all the way down to your third. The most often times you will have someone come off your bench is if one of your defenders doesn't start, because generally if a defender doesn't start, not a whole lot of teams use their substitutes on defensive options, maybe just one during the game. So that's something to keep in mind is don't put too much money into your bench because a lot of them will never see time. Cremonese had a 3-2 win against Ternana, another Serie B team. Okereke playing up top kind of looked good. He could be a fun budget option if the fixtures go well for Cremonese and the form continues. Still avoiding these players start out the season, but just one player that stood out for me on Cremonese. And our last team that played over the weekend was Bologna, 1-0 win against Cosenza. They got the clean sheet, so defensively looking sound, but you'd think that they'd have a better showing being an established Serie A team than against the Serie B team. There was a lot of rumors whether Arnautovic would be going to Manchester United or not. He played, and it sounds like today talks fell through with Manchester United, so he will not be going there. Not to say he won't be transferred anywhere before the deadline, but that questions kind of out of the way right now. Sansone also seemed good as an attacking option, especially if Arnautovic does leave and he's kind of the talisman striker. He could be looking good as well. But Bologna, I guess, just a decent all-round performance, moving on to the next round of the Coppa Italia and leaving it there. Let me know what you think about this. Did you notice anything else during the Coppa Italia? Do you see any other players from these teams that you suggest grabbing as options? Leave that in the comments. Please keep the conversation starting. Please keep subscribing. We're 3 away from 150, so let's try to start the season there. I think we're like 4 days out to the start of the season. So if there are any other last-minute preseason videos that you want to see, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to get one done. If not, I'll see you next time. Might be the game week 1 preview, and I'll talk to you then. Take care.